Picture this. You're a farmer in ancient Mesopotamia, around 3000 BCE. You've just harvested the most beautiful crop of barley you've ever grown. Your family is set for months. But there's a problem. Your roof is leaking, and you desperately need it fixed before the rains come. The village craftsman who repairs roofs, he doesn't need barley. His storehouse is already full of grain. What he needs is a new pair of sandals. So you trek across the village to find the sandal maker, hoping to trade your barley for sandals, which you can then trade for roof repairs. But plot twist, the sandal maker is a fisherman's son who only wants fresh fish. Now you're stuck in a ridiculous chain of bartering that might take you days to complete, all because you need someone to patch a few holes in your roof. This was the maddening reality of life before money. The barter system sounds romantic in theory. Direct exchange between people, no middlemen, just pure human connection. But in practice, it was an absolute nightmare. Economists call it the double coincidence of wants problem. But our ancient ancestors called it something far more colorful, I'm sure. You needed to find someone who not only had what you wanted, but also wanted exactly what you had to offer, at the exact same time, in the exact same quantities. It was like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube, while blindfolded and standing on one leg. So humanity got creative. People started using commodity money, objects that had intrinsic value and were widely desired. In different parts of the world, this took fascinating forms. Cowrie shells became currency across Africa, Asia, and Oceania, their natural beauty and relative scarcity making them perfect for trade. In ancient China, people traded silk and tea. Native Americans used wampum belts made from shell beads. Some Pacific islands used enormous stone discs called rhinestones, some weighing as much as cars, which never actually moved. People just agreed on who owned which stone. The Vikings used butter. Yes, butter. They packed it in barrels and buried it in peat bogs, where it could last for years. Imagine paying your taxes in butter. But here's where things get really interesting. Somebody, somewhere, and we'll never know exactly who, looked at a chunk of metal and had an absolutely revolutionary thought. What if we use this as money? It was a stroke of pure genius, and it would change human civilization forever. Metal had everything you could want in currency. It was durable, unlike grain that rotted or cattle that died. It was divisible. You could break it into smaller pieces or melt it down and reshape it. It was portable. A handful of metal was worth far more than the same weight in grain and much easier to carry than a live cow. It was uniform. One piece of gold looked pretty much like another. And most importantly, it was scarce enough to be valuable but common enough to actually use for trade. The first metals to enter the monetary scene were copper, bronze, and later iron. These base metals handled everyday transactions beautifully. Archaeological evidence suggests that pieces of copper shaped like miniature axes or knives circulated in ancient China as early as 2000 BCE. In the ancient Near East, people used metal rings and coils, weighing them out for each transaction on balance scales. It was clunky and inexact, but it beat the hell out of trying to trade 17 chickens for half a cart. Then came the aristocrats of the metal world, silver and gold. These precious metals had been treasured for jewelry and religious objects for millennia, but using them as currency elevated them to mythical status. Gold and silver were rare enough that even small amounts held tremendous value. Yet deposits existed across enough of the ancient world that they could actually circulate. They didn't tarnish or corrode, which meant they lasted forever. And they were absolutely gorgeous, which might seem superficial, but actually mattered immensely. People trusted and desired them instinctively. The real breakthrough came around 600 BCE in Lydia, a kingdom in what's now Western Turkey. The Lydians, clever traders that they were, got tired of weighing out bits of metal for every transaction. So they started creating standardized lumps of electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver, stamped with official marks, guaranteeing their weight and purity. These were the world's first true coins, and they were revolutionary. Suddenly, you didn't need a scale and an assayer for every transaction. The stamp of the king was a promise. This coin contains exactly this much precious metal. Trust it. Use it. Pass it along. The innovation spread like wildfire. Within a century, Greek city-states were minting their own coins, each bearing unique designs. Athens with its iconic owl, Corinth with its Pegasus, Aegina with its sea turtle. These weren't just currency. They were propaganda, art, and national identity rolled into tiny discs of metal. Soldiers carried coins from their home cities across the known world. Merchants accepted them across borders. For the first time in human history, there was something approaching a universal medium of exchange. Rome took the concept and ran with it into the end zone. The Roman denarius became the dollar of the ancient world, accepted from Britain to Mesopotamia. Roman mints churned out millions of coins, bearing the faces of emperors and celebrating military victories. When Rome paid its legions in coined silver, those soldiers spent that silver in Britain, Germania, Egypt, and Judea, spreading Roman economic influence everywhere their armies marched. The phrase "money talks" was literally true. Roman coins whispered the message of imperial power in every market square from Hadrian's wall to the Euphrates River. But here's something that would have blown ancient minds. The metal in those coins? Its value was largely psychological. Sure, gold and silver had some practical uses, but their monetary value far exceeded their utility for making jewelry or plating temples. We valued gold because we agreed to value gold. It was humanity's first grand collective delusion, and it was brilliant. Money worked because everyone believed it worked, and that belief became self-fulfilling reality. Medieval Europe saw metal money evolve further. Kings and nobles constantly debased their coinage, mixing in cheaper metals while claiming the coins contained the same amount of precious metal. It was inflation by deception, and people eventually caught on, demanding more coins for the same goods. The tension between the face value of coins, what the king said they were worth, and their intrinsic value, what they could be melted down for, created endless economic drama and the occasional peasant revolt. The Chinese, meanwhile, got sick of lugging around heavy strings of copper coins and invented paper money during the Tang dynasty, perfecting it under the Song dynasty around 1000 CE. Europeans thought this was insane when Marco Polo reported it. Money made of paper? Worthless paper backed by nothing but the emperor's promise? How could that possibly work? And yet it did. Because the emperor accepted paper notes for tax payments, which meant everyone else had to accept them too. The metal wasn't even necessary anymore, just the belief in the system. When Europeans finally caught on centuries later, paper money backed by gold and silver reserves became the standard. Banks would issue notes, promising to pay the bearer a certain amount of gold or silver on demand. These notes circulated as money, more convenient than hauling around chests of coins, but still, ultimately rooted in humanity's ancient trust in precious metals. That gold standard defined global economics well into the 20th century. During World War I, countries abandoned it to print money for the war effort. They tried to return to it afterward, but the Great Depression killed it for good. In 1971, President Nixon finally severed the last official link between the US dollar and gold. Modern money floats free, backed by nothing except faith in governments and economies. Yet here we are, thousands of years after some anonymous Lydian genius stamped the first coin, and we still hoard gold. Central banks hold massive gold reserves. Investors flee to gold during crises. We still feel that ancient pull, that primal trust in metal as real money. Bitcoin enthusiasts talk about their cryptocurrency as digital gold, trying to capture that same mystical quality. We can't quite shake the belief that metal, cold, heavy, eternal metal is what money is supposed to be. The story of how metal became money is really the story of how humans learned to trust abstractions, to build systems on collective belief rather than physical necessity. Those first coins weren't just metal. They were promises, agreements, tiny monuments to humanity's ability to cooperate. Every time you tap your credit card or check your bank balance on your phone, you're participating in a system that started with someone looking at a lump of copper or gold and thinking, what if we all just agreed this was valuable? That decision, made thousands of years ago in ancient marketplaces by people whose names we'll never know, might be humanity's most influential invention. More than the wheel, more than writing, money, specifically metal money, created the economic foundation for everything we call civilization. Not bad for some shiny rocks. The journey from metal to money represents humanity's greatest leap in cooperation and trust. Those ancient innovators who first stamped coins didn't just create currency. They invented a universal language of value that transcended borders and cultures. Today, whether we're tapping cards or trading cryptocurrency, we're still honoring that original bargain made millennia ago. To believe in something together. Metal became money because we decided it would, proving that humanity's most powerful tool isn't technology. It's our collective imagination and willingness to trust one another.